Hello and welcome back to another episode of Wrestling with Memories, or should I say the first episode in the Netflix era of wrestling. Fash, the Million Dollar Fan, and Waxabrain Hussein here again with you to talk through some of wrestling's big happening news. And that is the first and foremost thing that we need to talk about is the Monday Night Raw first episode ever on Netflix. Fash, it was built up to be the greatest show that was ever going to be put on by WWE. Do you think it lived up to the hype?
Well, I don't think it was built up as the greatest show they would ever put on, Wax. I think that's you doing hyperbole for once. But before I get going, I want to say, obviously, I'm not in the usual Wrestling with Memories cave, Wax. My life outside the podcast has taken me away today, so I'm not at home. I'm not in the cave. So bear with me if the audio's not great. But yeah, we're continuing to grind out work and content after our long hiatus. But in terms of the Raw episode, I mean, I think it kind of blew up the internet a little bit because of one aspect that I'm keen to talk about. But I think overall, I would say it was positioned very much for a new audience, a new global audience. This was as Triple H said afterwards, a standalone show.
Hmm.
The way they kept talking about storylines, explaining things, even explaining what wrestling is up front, was all about, okay, let's go and tell new viewers in a very simple layman terms, what is it that we do? And I think based on that, it was fine. The matches were good, but it was a very much, as I say, a standalone. And if you look at it from our perspective, I do think overall it was underwhelming because the people that you're expecting to turn up to a large degree they did, but nothing much came from it on the night. So that was my feeling, that it was solid, it was good for a new audience, but it was no great shakes.
Yeah, I think I very much agree with you, Fash. I think in my mind, I had actually built this up to be a bigger event than maybe it was realistically going to be. There's only so much revolution in wrestling that can happen, and I definitely don't think this was that. However, I think just on the plus point and just about the look, the appearance, and the vibe of the show, I thought that was really strong. It came across really well. The opening segment where they had the cold open that we watched prior to the show on the curtains, and then the curtains dropping down and Triple H appearing in the center of the ring. I thought that was all really well done, and it just gave that big event feel to it early on in the show. And we'll talk a little bit how I think that flagged towards the end of the show, but I think it was a really strong opening at least.
Oh man, the production was out of this world. And yeah, that opening, I say cold open, but done with that curtain was
Hmm.
outstanding. And I've seen other people that are not wrestling fans that have watched that and they're like, this was tremendous. So if we talk about wrestling being cinema, that was definitely it. And I think as an opening, it was outrageously good. And you know, when the curtain drops and it's Triple H, had to be Triple H, didn't it, in the middle of the ring. But I thought that was excellent. And that really set the tone for what you thought was going to be a revolutionary night, as you said, Wax.
Yeah, but very soon after we get the Rock appearing in the center of the
That's the
ring.
final boss to you, Wax.
The final boss, or is he a boss at all, Fash?
I
Because
think he
he
was.
looked
I
more
think.
like in the
I
first
think he was
segment.
Dwayne. Exactly. I think he was
Yeah,
Dwayne, and he was the Rock sometimes, and he's the final boss. So we'll call him. He was DOS basically.
or should we just call him what was he? Is he a
We
VP
we
now of
well we can
the
call
the
him Doc.
business?
We can call him.
Yeah.
Don't replace the O with an I. But you know he was a mix up. I don't know. He was a board member, but he came out dressed like the final boss. He even brought his little belt out with him. So it was confusing. I didn't bother shaving, Wax. He was a bit like us, which is not like
I
Dwayne either.
noticed that as well. He must have been on his fifth day as well, Fash,
A,
like you.
a, a few more grey hairs than you and I have, but
Yeah.
we're getting there.
I mean, I think that, as we say, this was bringing out the most recognizable wrestler of the last 2, 3 decades, other than maybe Stone Cold Steve Austin, maybe The Undertaker, and maybe one other name we're going to come to later on. But I
I
mean,
think you're missing out a pretty key name here,
and
but we'll get to him.
potentially John Cena as well. But um, unless you think I missed somebody else, but we'll come to that.
You know,
I think
how
my
could you
point.
miss out? No, no, I'm going to have to interject here. I thought you were talking about. I know you got booed out the building, Wax, but Hulk
Well, I
freaking
did. That's what I was
Hogan.
saying. That was my third name. I said I'll
Oh,
leave it till
I thought you
later.
said, I
I
thought
was
John Cena.
gonna,
You were talking, John
yeah,
Cena is not in the same league. But yeah, I mean, it's Netflix. This night one, The Rock was going to
yeah,
be there, right? And it was ideal for him to come out.
yeah,
But what happened next is what blew up the internet.
absolutely. Where I mean, I think there's two parts to this because initially he comes out before the first opening match. He proclaims Roman Reigns as the tribal chief. He calls Cody Rhodes the champion, and he sort of almost recognizes him, shows him the respect of a world champion, far removed from where they sort of left off um, round about the WrestleMania time, which again was pretty surprising, shocking.
It was weird what it was,
Yeah.
Wax. I don't think so. I mean, I think it was just that people were raising their own eyebrows and asking what was going on. Now, you say WrestleMania, what happened after WrestleMania? Remember, he turned up at Bad Blood when he came out and he did the kind of, the three. So this was just disconnected. Now, I get, for me, it would have worked as the final boss if he would have given them props, but then said something
Hmm.
which continues the rivalry. I mean, he mentioned Cody, I've made you bleed, and that will happen again. But then he gives some big props, and Cody's reaction was like a fangirl,
Yeah.
so that didn't really work. And then obviously the Roman thing I thought was a bit better, and we'll get to the match, right? But I thought, yeah, it was what was he playing? So I get it if he's Dwayne on the night, but he wasn't looking like Dwayne,
Yeah.
and it would confuse. So as a wrestling fan who follows it on a weekly basis, it wasn't sensible and it didn't make sense. Um, for a new audience, yes, The Rock, Moana, he doesn't want to be seen as a bad guy. He doesn't want to confuse that audience, which is a very lucrative audience. So it was, yeah, it was a bit, it was like, I wouldn't say Rock went into business for himself,
Hmm.
but certainly it didn't help the storyline aspects that confused people. And I think he added to the confusion later on rather than rectifying it.
Yeah, I mean, our first match was the big match, the tribal combat match between Solo Sikoa and Roman Reigns to decide who was going to be the tribal chief. I think no surprises really in that Roman Reigns wins that match. We might have expected some interference from somebody like The Rock. We had lots of interference from other people, but ultimately Roman Reigns was declared the winner. I think it was a good match, maybe an overbooked ending, but that's the sort of things that I like to see in big matches. And then The Rock comes out again as Paul Heyman is about to put the Ula Fala or Falafalu, whatever you want to
Oh, come
call it,
on,
Fash,
Wax. Who are you to,
on
just
uh,
you,
on
you don't
Roman
want to
Reigns.
mess with someone culture.
Well, we'll see about that. But The Rock comes out, he takes over and puts that onto the shoulders of Roman Reigns, and then again declares him as the tribal chief and recognizes Roman Reigns.
Tells him he
And then
loves him.
yeah, and then he goes and stands in the corner, and for you could put your house on it at that moment that you thought The Rock was going to attack Roman Reigns at that point. I just kept waiting for it because they kept shooting Roman Reigns without Rock in the angle. I
Yeah.
was just waiting for it, waiting for it. It never happened, and I think maybe that plus his earlier, his speech just put fans off a little bit. I think in terms of what they expected from the end of that match.
Well, there's a few things that I want to probably touch upon. The first thing with the interference, I think what they did there was it was a bit of a mini rerun of WrestleMania.
Hmm.
Once again, new audience, showing them the kind of chaos, introduced a few characters. People might wonder who these characters are and go back and watch some stuff. So I think they did a mini version of that. As you say, you were expecting Roman to win. Roman did win. I think The Rock telegraphed it. I think this was one of his first airs because when he came out, he kind of said Roman
Yep.
Reigns is the tribal chief, and they said, "Oh yeah, and he's going to take on Solo." Now that also didn't make sense with Bad Blood. If you remember, Rock came out and Solo said something, "Oh, it's all part of the plan." Well, so if the plan was him getting bitched out, then that was the plan, and The Rock didn't endorse him. But so I think that was one faux pas by The Rock. But as you say, the ending was what we expected. The next part, where The Rock comes back out, even I think everyone was waiting for the attack and the way they positioned it, and when you put it on around his neck, you're thinking something's going to happen. Once again, if he wasn't going to do something, he could have said something that adds to the intrigue, and I guess they could still do something there. I think the overriding feeling that people got after that segment was The Rock's not wrestling at
Yeah.
WrestleMania, which is a big downer. And maybe that was it. He kind of did these things to kind of give the impression that I'm not going to be there. So let's put a pause in everything. But as you say, odd, you expect him to do something. I know Roman's going to have a big celebration later this month. There's still some fans out there hoping that The Rock appears there and takes them out, but I think it's looking a little bit
Hmm.
far out now.
And it's a shame that much of this is all, dependent on The Rock's schedule, rather than what the WWE would like to portray and present at WrestleMania. We still have like 3.5 months left, right?
But
So
but
there's a
that's the thing is right. But once again, I think it's the whole Netflix thing because if they wanted to even continue this storyline simmering on the night, if The Rock wanted to, you could just have Roman wins, Rock's music hits, they have a stare down, and Paul Heyman
Hmm.
does the deed. And that still adds intrigue because there's nothing kind of resolved there. And it was
Yeah.
just leaving those crumbs. But I think it was more of a kind of, I
I
think
feel
what
like they
Rock did
tried
was,
to do that in some manner with him standing in the corner, the looks that
yeah,
he was
well,
giving, but
that's it.
not as
But
clear cut
yeah, not
as you
clear
made out
cut.
there.
And I think if you look at it from a commercial point of view, it was Rock really endorsing the two top stars
Yeah.
in the company to an audience. But yeah, like many, we were expecting something else, and that didn't happen. And The Rock didn't stop there, but I guess we'll get to that later on with Cody again.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let's just talk about Cody and the impact this angle has had on Cody, because you had some strong opinions off the air, Fash, about how this
Yeah,
makes Cody look versus, how he was coming into this event.
I don't think Cody comes out well in any of the scenarios now, unless they do something extraordinary. And the point is this: Cody was bloodied by The Rock, right? That we've talked about that. If you look just a recent episode, we talk about the best moments of the year and getting beaten up, bleeding in the rain. That was an outstanding visual. And now you have The Rock, begging him up, joking about Mama Rhodes, and Cody's lapping up. So if this is all, and we'll talk about this because obviously Rock was on NXT the next night, but later on Rock can pivot here, right? And I've said this
Mhm.
on Twitter as well. He can pivot by attacking Cody and saying, "Look how I played you," and it was all
Yeah.
part of his big plan. But that makes Cody a bigger sap than Sting used to be back in the day for being so trusting and just want to be The Rock's friend. And later on, you've seen the videos of them sharing The Rock's drink and having a great time and joking around. So I think if The Rock turns on later on, Cody looks like Sting version 2 of the 1990s. If they don't do that angle, then Cody just looks like a corporate kiss ass, which down the line, if he turns heel, could work, but just
Hmm.
makes him look like a little brother. So I don't see how he comes out of it in the same kind of anti-authority way that he did around about 12 months ago
Yeah.
when he set the agenda for WrestleMania. So that's my view in terms of from a storyline perspective, right? And like I say, Rock has tried to rewind on that a little bit. I don't think it was by design. I think it was based on the feedback again. And he talked about, the Rock's taking you on a ride, so kind of go with it. But what's your view on it? This is my view. I don't think Cody has an upside in this current scenario the way they've laid it out.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of feel like the only way to do it is to leave him out now of the picture going
But
forward.
that's
But again,
bad
that
as well,
doesn't.
right? So that's my
Well, it
point.
is unless you give him something else meaningful to do in the run up to WrestleMania.
But
I
with The
think,
Rock, forget WrestleMania. I
yeah,
mean, with The Rock, what happened was, right, The Rock beat him up. The Rock tried to stop him from
yeah.
finishing
But
his
what I would
story.
say, I
He
think one thing
finished his
you're
story,
not
and then
mentioning,
now it's
Fash.
corporate Rock,
Yeah,
and he's
yeah.
avoiding saying,
I get
and,
it. I
and
get it.
yeah, he
And it
said,
makes sense.
yeah,
There
you get
was
what I'm
that
saying. So
Raw after the WrestleMania
yeah,
where,
okay, what did
they
he
meet in
hand
the
to him?
ring.
Actually, I forgot about that. What did he
Yeah,
hand to him?
what did he
So
hand to him? But there was that moment of respect almost between the two
was
where,
it though? Because it was like he did say
there
this.
was a
No, no,
challenge, there was a
you actually
respect.
you open a can of worms here, Wax. So I'm gonna say, do you remember The Rock said at the time, my story with Cody Rhodes has just began,
Yeah.
and he'd said his story with I think Roman had ended then. So go back and watch it. So no, it doesn't make sense unless I say there's two scenarios. If he gave him the keys to the castle, right, and so later on a heel turn, then it makes sense. But he's still the little brother to The Rock's big brother. And if
Yeah.
it's something else, then
And I
how
think
do you
that's
turn it
the
into a feud? So they've kind of ignored that.
yeah.
They need to and what Triple H, despite my kind of jokes and things, what his era has shown, his little era so far, is that there is logic behind most of what they do.
Mhm.
But The Rock's the oddball in these scenarios. So as I say, I think they need to fix some things to make it all make sense. And I think they can, but Cody, I think, is a little bit damaged by it.
Yeah, and maybe there's a wider conversation to be had about Cody's run since WrestleMania and how difficult it is to be that pure babyface champion, but we'll not do that today
We
because
won't do that today.
that's
Yeah,
a whole other episode. I
absolutely.
want to move on a little bit more with the show. I think, the other big thing that I think came out of the show was the John Cena promo where he comes into the ring. And I thought it was really funny and really intelligent for him to refer to his losing streak just to make sure that people weren't considering him this all-time great star, all of a sudden going to win a world championship. He eventually built the promo up really well and got to the point where he announced he was going to be in the Royal Rumble, and potentially go on and win it. I know you're not the biggest fan of John Cena, Fash, but I think one thing we must say is that he, other than The Rock on this show and Hogan, definitely next in line, if not to The Rock in the current generation of fans that are watching the show.
Yeah, so I think a lot of people are revising history, right? So when we were in that period of, John Cena's supremacy, people our age were not great fans of John
No.
Cena. But after he changed from his kind of rapper gimmick to that 2006 onwards, you got the whole Cena getting cheers, Cena sucks. And people our age were Cena sucks, right? And it
Yeah.
was the lol Cena wins. And it did put me and others off the WWE main event scene because Vince was just pushing him, and there was other people that could have got opportunities in the long term that didn't. So I think people remember that, but now he's got to a stage where he's part time, he's done other things, and he's in that legend category.
Hmm.
So then everyone's view always changes, right, to a large degree, good or bad, as our friend Hulk Hogan is finding out. So I think now people wouldn't have an issue with Cena coming back, winning the Rumble, winning his final championship, but let's not forget the past. And for me, you said, for me, it's always Austin and Rock, right?
Yeah.
And Hogan before that. And John Cena has been the flag bearer, and he's, in terms of years, he's had more years than The Rock and Austin, and he was the face after the Attitude Era and what have you. But it wasn't as hot a phase as those two. But what he's done and what he's done since in Hollywood, once again, for that Netflix audience, they're seeing Dwayne Johnson, they're seeing John Cena,
Yeah, absolutely.
recognizable faces, so all makes sense. But yeah, it was kind of sense. So does he win the Rumble? Does he win the Elimination Chamber? If The Rock isn't going to compete at WrestleMania, which seems to be the case right now, then they're trying to get to Cody versus John Cena. It looks like some way.
And if I had to put you on the spot right now, Fash, who wins the Rumble? CM Punk, John Cena, someone else?
It'd be easy for them to make John Cena win the Rumble, but I think what they should do is he doesn't win the Royal Rumble. That adds to his
Yeah.
desperation, adds to his losing streak, and then it's the Elimination Chamber
Hmm.
or something like that he wins and goes to face. But once again, if you win the Royal Rumble, you go for Cody, right? Logically, the winner of the Royal Rumble should go for Cody Rhodes, unless it's somebody who really wants to take on Gunther, which
Yeah.
could be a CM Punk.
Yeah. I mean, it feels like the CM Punk Gunther
But
match
then they're
is
talking about
the.
Roman. They're talking about Roman Punk. So this is
It
where
depends.
it's
Yeah.
great right now. This is where
Yeah.
it's great right now because there are so many options. And last year, I think there's probably more excitement if you compare last year to this year right now
Hmm.
because of the Rock question mark. But last year, you thought you were getting one thing, then you got another thing, and this year, I think one thing you can say is you don't really know what way they're going to go. So it'll be interesting to see how it all pans out.
Next up on the show was the WWE Women's World Championship match, where Rhea Ripley regained the world title over Liv Morgan. One thing I will say for both ladies is they looked exceptional in the ring. The match was fine.
Just you behave yourself,
The match
Wax.
was fine. Rhea Ripley went on to win. I think it's been quite a long rivalry, this, and actually, I think it's been a very positive rivalry for both women. I think it's elevated Liv Morgan definitely to the level of one of the top women in the business. But it looks like Rhea Ripley will be on her way to
It's time to
WrestleMania.
move on. It's time to move on from it. I think it's
Hmm.
good. Uh, Obviously, the Dom and Rhea partnership was iconic. I
Yep.
don't think Liv and Dom is the same level, but you had to move away from it. So yeah, I think it was good. It achieved what it set out to do. Rhea's the champion. She should be the champion, and she moves on to, a new challenge. And then, of course, Wax. I don't know if the viewers know or not, but you love the Undertaker's dong, right?
I
you would,
love the
you would,
Undertaker's
dong,
gong. Yes.
yeah, dong. I think
You know what? Yes, Fash, I do. I think
he'd love to hang off it, but
it's always a
ultimately,
huge moment
do you think
of
it was a bit
the
of a extra
anti.
moment there? I mean, didn't
I don't think it was necessary, but Undertaker's a legend of the business, and I think anytime he comes up, and unlike other people, he doesn't take up too much time, right? Over the last couple of appearances, he's there, gets it over and done with, and moves on, which
I
I
just
think is
I get that he doesn't want to be the dead man character
yeah,
anymore.
But that's the one that we want to see, isn't it?
That's the one. But and he did, as I joked in the last episode, he did do it in Saudi Arabia
Yeah.
in a football match. So it's not that he will never do it again. But yeah, I think that's what people want to see. But if he didn't do it at WrestleMania, he's not going to do it here. I think it was fine for what it was, but it was just like we need to get the Undertaker on the show, and this is where he kind of fits. So yeah, it
Yeah.
was fine. Interestingly, he didn't get booed.
No, and we'll come to why you refer that into just a minute. I just want to point out my star of the show was Scarlett Bordeaux. Even though she was only on the screen for a couple of minutes, she was out of this world. That's all I'll say for now,
I don't
Fash.
know if I'm doing this show with Wax or with Jerry the King Lawler today.
Well,
Something's not
there's a
right.
bit of Jerry the King in all of us, Fash. That's all I'll say. Next, I think was probably the throwaway match of the evening. I mean, there were only four matches, but it was Jey Uso versus Drew McIntyre. Jey Uso gets a surprise roll-up victory. I think there's lots more to come with the Uso Sami Zayn Drew rivalry, and I actually think if Roman Reigns doesn't have The Rock and he's not going to face CM Punk, I think the next logical big fight for him is Drew McIntyre, and I think they can actually put on quite a good storyline up to that
Yeah,
point.
I think the next feud will be Drew Roman. I don't think it's a WrestleMania feud, but I think it's the next feud if they can, get through Royal Rumble, Elimination Chamber, the things they're doing. There's a Saturday night's main event coming up as well.
Yeah,
So I do think, yeah, logically that's who goes over. But Drew lost to Jay, right? So he needs to get that win back. Do you think it was the right result?
I
Do you think
think
Drew should have won?
I think the only reason they did it is to continue this story on for a little bit longer. I think Drew's beat him most other times that they've faced each other, which surprised me, as you say, that the Jey won this. But I think they want to give the fans something to cheer.
Can I
Um,
just say one thing as well? The crowd reaction was odd. And I think this is the thing with Jey was so super over, right? And when the music plays, he comes out. But in terms of the actual match, there wasn't
mhm.
much heat in it. The crowd didn't really
I
react till
think,
the end, which was a little bit odd, and it's happened a
yeah.
few times.
I was going to come to the crowd towards the end of the show, Fash. I'll mention them again, but I think they had a star moment next up when Hulk Hogan comes out to advertise his Real American Beer, a partnership that WWE entered into just before this show was put out, and one that surprised us all because Hulk Hogan, a bit of a controversial character these days, but having him out there in California, a true blue state, it seemed to make no sense. But I always think,
Triple H is taking revenge for back in the day. He's an intelligent guy, right? Like you said, sending Hulk Hogan out Los Angeles and getting booed out the building.
yeah.
Every fan could have told you that was going to happen. So I think Triple H is taking revenge for the feud they had back in 2000 and what was it, 2003?
Yeah, I mean, I feel a little bit bad for the Hulkster, right?
But was
Because,
it Hulkster or were they booing Jimmy Hart? Wax? I think
well,
because my friends tell me Hogan's saying it was Jimmy Hart that was getting booed and the
I
Hulkster
don't
could never
know.
get booed.
The Pukesters, as Macho Man called them once, definitely deserted the Hogan on the night, and I think I feel like it's a real shame because this guy's a legend of the business, right? And I think people have done far worse than Hogan has over his life, and maybe again we'll cover that one day,
I don't know, Wax. I think
and we'll
the
go on
boos,
to
I think, are
receive more
justified, right? The
acclaim.
boos are justified. Now, it's obviously not just political, because my point being, Undertaker didn't get booed. And let's not get into the politics too much, but Hogan's done a bunch of stuff. And listen, every time he's came out recently, he's been booed. And, I just can't believe they didn't know that he was going to get
Yeah,
booed. But now there's talk, and I think this would make sense that once they roll him out next time, and they will do it again, he should be a heel.
he should
I
absolutely
think,
be.
the funny thing is, if you start playing that voodoo chill music, right,
Yeah,
and he comes out in the
they'll
back,
start
then he'll get a
cheering.
pop, and then he'll get a pop, and then he'll still get booed, but it'll work.
Yeah,
So they should just embrace the Hollywood
absolutely.
Hogan thing, because yeah, that was like depending on like a car crash type
Yeah.
situation. But I do think he's going to blame Jimmy Hart.
Well, I'm sure he will. And then we go on to the final match of the evening, which was the CM Punk Seth Rollins match, which I was really looking forward to because they built up this feud for
Yeah,
more than a year. I thought the match started really slow. It picked up towards the end and it was a good finish. But this is where I thought the crowd really flagged right at the end of the show. They were very
yeah.
quiet throughout the course of the match. Whether that's on the wrestlers or not, I'm not so sure. I think this was an audience that was not necessarily a true wrestling audience. I think that money people would have paid for the show, as I think noted by
The
the
highest
saying
gate,
a
yeah,
highest
and
gate
people
number.
cheering for paying the highest
Yeah,
number for
absolutely.
tickets, which is
Um,
ironic in itself.
and I think this audience was not used to sitting there watching wrestling for 3 hours. A lot of paid celebrities in the house, or what I'm going to call paid celebrities. I think generally they flagged, and it just went to show maybe it wasn't the true wrestling audience. Otherwise, I think this match would have been recognized a little bit more than it was, finishing out the
Yeah,
show.
it's odd because I think it was a good match. When you look at it, the crowd didn't help. I think the pace that they probably set didn't help, but they were telling a good story. But yeah,
Hmm.
it wasn't the perfect backdrop in terms of audience for it. But I still thought it was a good match. Like I said, they've built up that rivalry so well. And at one point, we thought that was going to be a WrestleMania
Yeah.
match, but obviously they're going in different directions. It'll be interesting to see what they do with Seth next. CM Punk obviously cut a promo afterwards, which you could have caught online.
Hmm.
He's certainly going for the World Championship. So it'll be interesting. But yeah, I think it was a good match. Maybe people were expecting too much, but I think you're right. The combination of the pace they set and the crowd that was there didn't help it. And it was 3 hours. It was a
Yeah.
long night, and that can go either way. But it was good to see them in the main event. They certainly deserved it. And CM Punk's been really good. Um, yeah, yeah. Maybe the expectation was just set too high
Yeah,
for
I think
this one.
so. And I think that's maybe the story of the show from my perspective anyway. I set my expectations very high. They weren't quite met. I still enjoyed the show. It was the first live Raw I'd watched in many a year. Fash, I usually catch them afterwards. I think overall, a pretty good show for me. I wouldn't call it out of this world. It didn't have the huge storyline angles that maybe we wanted to see. Some good wrestling, some good moments, and just a good buzz around the show generally. And I think initial indications are that it's been a very successful showing. I doubt that
It's
that will
knocked off.
continue.
It's knocked off Squid
It
Game.
has, it has. Um,
Off the charts. But obviously now it's where the comedy starts, right? Because
yeah,
all the journalists online will be like, well, "What's the ratings?" But as you say, Netflix has released a press release, and it's done really well. And you'd expect it to, right? There was
yeah.
so much hype. Like I said, there's so many people that don't watch wrestling that were asking about this. And I think the interesting thing will be how you take it forward now, because now
Mhm.
it's a regular thing. Next week, I think we go back to the episodic
Yeah,
formula. And it's all about kind of going back, refocusing on the storyline. So it'll be interesting to see how it all evolves. But that's the main thing. You expected something from The Rock once again, it didn't happen. So therefore, I think that was the underwhelming aspect of it. But in terms of a standalone show, some blow off matches, I think it was solid. It was more about the spectacle
hmm.
than the in ring action on the day. And what did you think about the guy that was smoking weed?
Well, I would say it's odd for us here seeing that in the UK, but I mean, them being in LA and it all being legal seems to be the done thing. Although, yeah, inside an arena with kids all around, didn't seem the most intelligent of things. But I suppose that's rappers for you.
That and the other thing that I thought was really funny, which was the backstage segment with the Rock leaving Triple H hanging when he was looking for that one final handshake, one final high five, and
Yeah,
the Rock just turned and left him hanging there, just
yeah,
like he did in the '90s in the Attitude Era.
yeah,
Wax.
yeah. Maybe pointing to something in the future, Fash. Who knows? But I think that was a seminal moment, definitely for WWE, at least if not for all the fans. I think there's lots more to come in this Netflix era of wrestling, and we'll be there to cover it, Fash.
We hopefully will indeed. As you say, it was a historic night, and it's been historic returning Wax. So this is our third show in quick succession. As we always say, check out the archives for all the stuff we've done up to now. But yeah, it was fun, and as you say, it's a very, as we said last time, it's such an exciting time
Yeah,
in the business and the way everything is evolving. So enjoying it certainly.
absolutely. And on that note, do join us for the next show, which will be back onto our 1993 timeline. Until then, I'm Wax, he's Fash, and we'll see you soon.